existence in the first place. Well, it's this branch now.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Morning.
We are going to go ahead and get started and probably have a couple of people trickle in. So I'm going to go ahead. I want to formally welcome you all to the 12th annual chapter meeting of the California chapter of the Music Library Association. For those of you, yay! For those of you who don't know me, my name is Casey Burgess, and I am the current chapter chair. I thought it would be meaningful to talk a little bit about the history of where we are today. Before colonization, these were the ancestral lands of the Tongva tribe, sometimes known as the Gabrielino tribe after colonization. They call this land Tovangar, meaning the world, this hill, and everything around it, and believe it was created by Quawar, a mystical god with no form or gender, who was revered for their creative prowess and divine presence. And as the cosmic dance of creation unfolded, Quawar sang and danced the world and the higher deities into existence, which I thought was impactful, not only as a beautiful conception of the world, but also considering our profession and passion for music and the performing arts. The Tongva were basket weavers, seafarers, and have been here since at least 6000 BCE. In fact, a Tongva woman is still present today on the official City of Los Angeles seal, standing in front of the Pacific Ocean with the San Gabriel Mountains behind her. The Tongva people first encountered Spanish colonizers in 1542 via Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo. After his death, it would be over 200 years before the Spanish would attempt to colonize the region. Gaspar de Portola and his Spanish Armada arrived in 1769 when Spain enslaved the Tongva peoples and forced them to build the Misión San Gabriel Arcángel. Several failed uprisings occurred throughout the years, much to the detriment of the Tongva people. I support the reconstructive efforts of the remaining Tongva Gabrielino people and encourage you all to visit native.ca to look at the indigenous peoples in the area where you work. I recognize that words without action mean little, so I have donated to the Curuvunga Village Springs, a nonprofit dedicated to providing opportunities to inform the public about the Gabrielino Tongva people, as well as protecting, preserving, restoring, and revitalizing the Curuvunga Village Springs, which means place where we are in the sun, located at University High School here in Los Angeles. In 1821, Mexico declared independence from Spain. In 1843, this land would become Rancho San Jose de Buenos Aires on a land grant from California Governor Miguel Torrena to Maximo Alanis. At the end of the Mexican-American War in 1848, the United States purchased 55% of Mexico's land for a meager $15 million, which is approximately $599 million today, through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. That land would become the states of California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, most of Arizona and Colorado, and parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Wyoming. After the war ended, the land grant was honored until the California Land Grant Act of 1851, which ascertained and settled land claims. Essentially, it acted to void previous land ownership to grant land to Americans. In this case, the land would become Westwood was claimed by Benjamin D. Wilson and W.T.D. Sanford in 1866. The land was subsequently sold to John W. Wolfskill in 1884, who renamed it Wolfskill Ranch. The Wolfskill home was located at what is currently the corner of Wilshire and Beverly Glen. Wolfskill was originally from Missouri, but moved to California and became the director of the Los Angeles and Pacific Railroad, which attempted to run a rail line through this land to connect Los Angeles to Santa Monica. Sound familiar to anyone? Purple Line. And create lots for a town he wanted to name Sunset. Sunset was a failure, but he retained the land after a legal battle. Nothing happened to the land. It remained uncultivated and unused until after Wolfskill died. His heirs sold the land in 1919 to Arthur Letts, an English immigrant who owned department stores like Bullock's and the Broadway. After his death, the land was inherited by his son-in-law, Harold Jans, VP of the Jans Investment Company. And in 1922, the land started to be developed and sold to homeowners. UCLA was founded in 1919, originally as the southern branch of the University of California on Vermont Avenue in downtown LA, but by 1925 had outgrown its campus due to the enrollment demand. So the Jans brothers sold some of their land for $1 million, only about a third of its actual value. Could you imagine doing that today? This discount was likely to get the contract so that the university could draw in prospective homebuyers and business owners to aid in the development of the land. The Westwood campus was opened in 1929 after a 2-year construction. If you're interested in learning more about Westwood's history, I, as a former long-term resident of Westwood, am giving a driving tour tomorrow of some of the major landmarks in the area. What does the story of Westwood tell us? The land was revered by artists in the time of the Tongva. It was colonized and cultivated by finance bros and department store owners, and is still mostly owned by some of the wealthier residents of LA. But something in the land still calls to artists, the musicians, the filmmakers, the dancers, the painters, and visual artists. We help to hold and share the story of artists with others. Now, I'm not a fan of vocational awe, but context can help remind us of our place in this world. MLA was founded in 1931, and the California chapter founded originally in 1941. Very soon after, split into the North and South chapters in 1946, and was reunited in 2013, hence why this is only our 12th annual meeting, despite our 83-year history. Now I'd like to give an overview of the meeting today, but I would encourage you to pull up the program on our website. There are QR codes here, as well as on various posters around the room. We will start with 2 amazing session presentations, one from Matthew Best and Kate Hamori on the Hugo and Christine Davise Fund at UCLA, and another from Taylor Greene on incorporating AI literacy into music library instruction. This will be followed by a short coffee break before a plenary session featuring Dr. Knapp, who will be speaking on Librarians as Collaborators. We will then be providing lunch courtesy of Clementine Bakery and Cafe. And afterwards, we'll take our hot girl walks to the Schoenberg building to tour both the UCLA Music Library and the Ethnomusicology Archive, thanks to Matthew Vess and Maureen Russell. Maureen will then follow with a presentation on the Adam Matthew Digital Project. We will then take a break to return here to hear from Hermine Vermeij on getting involved in MLA's committees and subcommittees, followed by our town hall and business meeting. Finally, I will be here to assist anyone who may need help with adding themselves to our new Google group, which after this meeting will act as our listserv. I hope you will all join us for dinner afterwards at BJ's Tacos in Westwood. The address is listed on the program webpage, and there is parking available at the nearby Trader Joe's. At the back of the room, there are some snacks who might need something throughout the day. There's a water filling station down the hallway near Cafe 451, which can provide cups if you did not bring one of your own. Our sessions will primarily be held in this room. However, there are a few parts of our program that will be in other locations. A map of the locations can be found on the conference website under Accommodations and Parking. Sessions held here will be recorded and made available at a later date for those who are interested in revisiting these sessions. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me or other members of the programming committee. Speaking of which, I have many people to thank before we commence. First and foremost, I would like to thank the members of the programming committee who helped to make this meeting possible. This includes Matthew Best of UCLA, Lindsay Hanson-Brown from CSUN, and Laura Diskin from Glendale Library Arts and Culture and the Brand Library. Additionally, I'd like to thank Terry Lewis from CSU Fresno, our treasurer, and I'd like to thank each and every one of our speakers for putting together their presentations and for agreeing to be here to present to you all today. Finally, a big thank you to UCLA for agreeing to host us for this conference and for providing such a wonderful welcome last night with Ben Frequency. These chapter meetings are important. We are here to share information and, more importantly, experience with each other. We have so much to learn from our colleagues whose work we don't often get to see or appreciate. I encourage you to ask questions and learn from the experiences they are here to share with us. But mainly, I encourage you all to find connection at this conference. This is our first in-person meeting since the pandemic in 2020. We have persisted as a group, holding online meetings and reaching out to each other through virtual channels. However, now we have the opportunity to connect in person. Many of us are familiar faces, but others are new. The core of this organization and of this chapter is to connect music librarians to each other and to support each other. Now is the time when our network to each other is more important than ever. In looking to the future, I hope we will continue to hold in-person meetings that allow for networking and connection in a time where disconnection, ironically, is all too easy. I hope that we will be able to support music librarians of the future and encourage their participation in this organization. And I hope that we will be able to work on the sustainability of smaller chapters within the larger Music Library Association. I pass these hopes on to our new chair-elect, Dr. Tamar Barzell, who will be taking on the role of chair in June. I hope you will support her as she transitions into this role. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to speaking with you all throughout the day. And now I'd like to invite Matthew Best and Kate Hamori up to start prepping for their presentation.
We'll use the mic. Hello. Oh, this is light.
Hello.
It's very nice. Okay, shall we?
Sure. We're a minute early, but are you okay with
Is everyone okay with being ahead of schedule? For those of you who don't already know me, I'm Kate Hamori. I came to UCLA from the MLS program at Indiana University. And that transition has been a really important lesson for me in the importance of developing a library that is for its users. The UCLA Music Library and IU Music Library are very different in scope and in approach because the focus of the two institutions' music programs is also quite different. And one of the things that really impressed me when I came here was the variety of methods the UCLA Music Library has used to adapt its more traditional resources to continue supporting students who either don't need written scores or don't want to drive all the way across LA to go pick up a library book. For example, a few years ago, Matthew took the initiative to remove our barely functional microfilm reader, I believe, and replace it with a recording booth that looks like this. That's with the lights on and the lights off with the booth lighting. This strategic repurposing of library resources, in this case equipment and space, has been incredibly beneficial for music students, creating a space for UCLA students to record their own music, whether they are actually music majors or not. Today's presentation focuses on another example of repurposed library resources, namely the development of the Hugo and Christine Davise Fund from an acquisitions-based gift to a diverse and multifaceted financial resource that is flexible enough to support many of our patrons' professional and musical goals. Hugo and Christine Davise were what you might call a musical power couple. They spent the majority of their lives teaching, writing, and performing music in LA. One of Hugo's students, composer Ginger Meyerson, recalls, quote, "Hugo was a great teacher. I learned a lot about composition, music history, and a few things about myself. I think Hugo and Christine, between them, knew almost everything about Western music." The Hugo and Christine Davise Fund was developed in the early 1990s with help from UCLA music librarian Stephen Fry. Understood broadly as an endowment to support music since 1900 at the music library, the fund was used primarily for collection development, allowing the music library to expand its collection of contemporary scores. But as the music library's patron base has developed, so too has our use of the Davise Fund, which has now been used for a wide variety of projects involving music since 1900. A significant amount of rethinking the Davise Fund can be attributed to music librarian David Gilbert in the early 2010s. For example, a music library work plan from 2012 that I dug up on Confluence featured a subheading titled "Reconceptualize the Library as Place, Transform Research Services," under which Bridget Reisenberg and Dave Gilbert outlined their plans to use the Davise Fund to pay for student tickets to 4 LA new music concerts, as well as to sponsor a performance by a local new music ensemble and offer students free admission. Despite hesitations about the, quote, usual UCLA labyrinthine and inefficient bureaucracy to do anything out of the ordinary, and David indeed succeeded in doing something out of the ordinary with the Davise Fund, a tradition that has continued since he retired in 2016. So I'm going to flip my page. There we go. What really struck me when reading through Bridget and David's plans was the desired outcomes that they both list. They mentioned the potential positive impact that this use of the Davise Fund could have on the library, increasing student interaction with the music library, and consequently their awareness of the resources we provide, increasing the library's visibility within the LA community, and forming a donor base to help financially support the library in future years. However, both Bridget and David also list a desired outcome that doesn't directly benefit the music library. Bridget hopes that, quote, "students have more opportunities to attend music events in Los Angeles thanks to the music library," while David notes that students have an opportunity, or students may have an opportunity, to attend a professional concert for free in Schoenberg Hall. These two desired outcomes speak volumes about the UCLA Music Library's longstanding commitment to supporting students, even when that support doesn't necessarily have to do with the music library itself. David Gilbert's reconceptualization of the Davise Fund has allowed us to provide financial and logistical support for the projects and experiences that are important to our patrons and students, even when they stretch beyond the walls of the library. At first, the Davise Fund was used to pay for one or a few public events or concerts each year. Recently retired music librarian Callie Holmes stressed the importance of using the fund to do work that is replicable and supporting projects that engage students and faculty across departmental lines in the music school. So in 2017, the music library moved to a submissions-based process for Davise Fund projects, encouraging ethnomusicology and musicology applications in particular to make it clear that projects from all three music departments would be welcomed. Over the years, we developed detailed goals and guidelines for submissions, and as of 2020, we began publicly publishing announcements of the winning projects, which allowed us to celebrate their work while also providing a resource of example projects for future applicants. The types of projects that have come out of the Davise Fund have varied in nature, but we've been able to kind of categorize them into a few general groups: commissions or calls for scores, performances, educational events, recordings, engraving and publishing projects, and residencies. Using library funds to take on projects of this size and nature has presented some challenges in the past. For example, it can sometimes be difficult to complete an individual project within a 1 year time span. This is especially the case when it comes to music engraving, which is a very complicated process that can take over a year to complete. There have been times when it has actually made more sense to split the funding for a project over multiple years, for example, paying for a commission 1 year and then financing the recording of that piece the following year. As the Davise Fund has grown in popularity, we've also had to make decisions about how to handle repeat applicants. The submission process for the Davise Fund is not anonymous, which allows us to take recent project types and past applicants into account when making decisions. With this in mind, we've tried to support a variety of projects from across the School of Music so as not to favor particular individuals or programs. However, we have generally been very open to repeat applicants, especially when they propose significantly different projects or ask for additional funding to expand a project that was already supported by the Davise Fund. Out of these 6 categories of projects, the majority of our funding has gone toward commissions and calls for scores, which is one of the areas that feels most relevant to our work as music librarians. As the fund was originally conceived as a way to support music since 1900, it seems apt that it would be used to fund the writing and publishing of music by up-and-coming composers, many of whom come from within our own patron base. In some cases, one project might tick multiple boxes, as was the case with LA-based chamber ensemble Bridge to Everywhere, who proposed a workshop for Herb Alpert School of Music students on contemporary intercultural music collaborations, followed by a concert that included several of the workshopped pieces. The concert was also recorded and can now be accessed via the UCLA library. Part educational event, part performance, part residency, and part recording, the Bridge to Everywhere proposal seemed like an especially fruitful application that we are proud to fund in 2022. As of this year, roughly half of Davise Fund projects have been proposed by faculty, largely because for the first several years, applications were not officially open or publicized to graduate students. However, we are pleased to see the graduate student slice of this pie increase with each passing year as our amazing students continue to tell us about their new and exciting musical projects. For example, one of this year's winning projects has been coordinated by one of our amazing composition students, Sion. In her project, A Harmony of Endangered Voices, a multifaceted exploration of endangered species through music and ecology, Sion plans to compose a 6-movement piece based on the soundscapes of endangered species while simultaneously working with the UCLA Department of Ecology to create an audio analysis library which will be used for educational and curricular purposes at UCLA. Beyond the walls of UCLA, the project is also partnered with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Los Angeles Zoo and Botanical Gardens. Sion's project is a great example of how the Davise Fund can extend the music library's outreach goals and facilitate meaningful partnerships both in and beyond the LA musical community. The majority of projects we fund are still coming from the music department as opposed to ethnomusicology or musicology, which again reflects the Davise Fund's roots in librarianship, acquisitions, and music publishing. However, the Davise Fund has been used to support several large-scale research projects as well. For example, 3 of my classmates in the musicology department applied to the Davise Fund last year in order to found a new open access multimedia journal that they're calling Sounds Promising. which is an amazing name. I'm sorry, I just love it. Sounds promising, which, quote, focuses on the liminal or interspaces, intersectional, interdiscipline, intercultural, interpersonal, that music and sound touch in order to invite broad collaboration between and among researchers in early stages of their careers, or who may be regularly marginalized or delegitimized in academic discourse, end quote. The Sounds Promising creators have envisioned broadly conceived issues that may include work in any of the following formats. As you can see from this very, very long list, the journal is meant to be flexible enough to incorporate many different types of knowledge and musical creation, with the main guiding principles for content revolving around amplifying the voices that are often left out of the traditional scholarly publishing world. Finally, I can share one of my favorite graphs in this presentation, which reflects the steady increase in number of Davise Fund applications over the past 6 years, from 10 to nearly 30 applications that we assess annually. And now I will hand things over to Matthew so he can discuss some of the library publishing projects that have grown out of the Davise Fund.
What did I get? Oh, I pressed a period instead of the arrow.
Oh,
Thank you.
One of the ways I've worked to extend the reach of the fund is by developing an extensive open access project in parallel with student and faculty work. After David Gilbert retired in 2016, I was tasked with overseeing the Davise Fund projects on a yearly basis. Around the same time, I was selected to co-lead a strategic plan implementation team for the UCLA library called Value and Visibility. I asked myself, how can I make the Davise Fund projects more visible beyond UCLA? I also wanted to strengthen the partnerships with faculty and students that the fund had started. I started to imagine the ways to get the library acknowledged outside of UCLA, such as asking to be listed in the acknowledgements on recording project liner notes and any potential published scores or research projects. I also started to wonder if the library could publish works ourselves, but what would that look like and how would I imagine it? I initially thought of publishing the winning scores from the ensemble and music residencies supported by the Davise Fund, hosting digital editions of the scores in our institutional repository. There was precedent from a similar UCLA library project, as our annual undergraduate research prize winners' work were hosted there. In that model, the students could choose to retain full copyright or use a Creative Commons license. I wondered if this was really getting at the visibility goal, though. Would the music community find the scores in the repository? I spoke with Christine Clark from Theodore Front, who is very supportive of the project and willing to provide the scores via print on demand, even though they would be available for free online in the repository. They were even open to a memorandum of understanding that would not restrict the library from any form of publishing. But I had some difficulty getting that project approved here at UCLA. I assumed the issue was the partnership with a for-profit distributor, but the music faculty shared my vision, and after a year, they pressed me to continue to pursue this. So I made some slight modifications to my pitch. I essentially changed the partnership model. The library would partner with the composer, and the composers could feel free to partner with Theodore Front if they so desired. We would not have an MOU. We would subsidize the first printing of the scores and parts, and these would be part of the prize for the composers, as they could offer them for sale if they wanted to. The initial publication took about 9 months from start to finish. There were a complex set of decisions we needed to make to establish the standards for a consistent edition and address copyright concerns, not to mention the lengthy process of editing the score and parts with the composer. I collaborated with colleagues from library administration, preservation, cataloging, and scholarly communications to produce the edition. The end result was a hybrid edition with digital open access scores and printed scores and parts. The digital scores were hosted in UC's digital repository called eScholarship, and the physical scores and parts were offered for sale by Theodore Front and circulated from the library. I worked with Marty Brennan, copyright librarian, to refine the concept of the edition and develop the composer agreement. My associate university librarian at the time, Judy Gonzalez, helped me get the project approved and establish the title for the series. We called it Contemporary Score Edition. I set some standards for the edition, which I'll illustrate with the first score we published. And this is shown in the digital repository. I designed a standard cover, title page, and front matter layout, and standard plate marks for the scores and parts. Standards about the music notation and fonts, also creating a house style for the edition. For all of these, I had to keep UCLA guidelines in mind and interpret them for music. Hermine Vermeij cataloged both the digital and printed dishes, and Callie Holmes helped edit the front matter. My colleagues in preservation and the bindery, principally Don Aveline, Will Lynn, and Mike Foley, prepared and printed the physical edition. When I received the printed edition and it is cataloged, I send the desired number of scores to the composer and the distributor. That may be done. I'll just I'll talk loudly. And share any information via email and social media to music librarians in the UCLA music and library communities. One of my objectives with this project was connect student composers to the music score industry and potentially get them thinking about access to their scores, possibly preservation of them. The first composer whose work we published provided this lovely quote that really reflects the potential impact on this experience had on his career. I'll read it. Being published by the Contemporary Score Edition has had an important impact on my development as a composer. It has been a huge help to establish myself professionally and make my music available to performers. The edition set the stage for a larger project with an external partner, a project focused solely on digital scores. In 2020, I used one-time funds to partner with Kaleidoscope Chamber Orchestra on their annual call for scores. I was interested in a partnership with them, particularly because while they're a local ensemble, they also had a major global call for scores. I underwrote the call and offered the option for open access publishing for entering composers. I was expecting roughly 2,000 total submissions and hoping for around 200 composers to indicate interest in open access publishing. We received over 7,800 submissions and published over 5,500 open access scores. I think that this was the largest call for scores that has happened in the world, actually. But people don't publish that, so I'm not sure. During the call, we reached over 750,000 viewers online in collaboration with Kaleidoscope, which I felt significantly addressed our goal of making the UCLA Music Library more visible beyond the walls of our institution. As a part of the submission form, we asked some optional demographic questions from which we discovered that over 60% of the submissions were by composers from outside North America, and at least 1/3 of the submission were composers from underrepresented groups. These scores are only available online. There is no feasible way for me to provide them in print editions. The resulting collection has received over 245,000 uses and nearly 110,000 downloads, bringing the cost per use for us under 30 cents in 4 years. This collection, with a focus on emerging and global composers, includes composers currently receiving recognition, including 3 composers featured in the Washington Post 22 for 22, Composers and Performers to Watch this year by Michael Andor Brodeur. After the initial call for scores that we did with Kaleidoscope, I dreamed of repeating the process internally, focusing on UCLA-based musicians. This would allow us to fully own or brand the call for UCLA. This past year, I was able to do that by establishing a score series with faculty composers. Faculty performers, not composers, titled Resonate. The first iteration was led by UCLA saxophone professor Jan Barry Baker. Many of you heard her perform the winning submission last night. For Resonate, I've established a replicable procedure for sponsoring a call led by a faculty member. I worked with Sally Marquez, a colleague in communications, to create an email list of composers with a subscribe option. I also developed an online entry form that automatically emailed composers instructions for how to submit anonymous scores for the call for scores and submit scores also to the Contemporary Music Score Collection. You might remember that I asked librarians in MLA and YAML to share the call with their users. Because we asked entering composers how they heard about the call, I know that many of you did that, and I really appreciate it. Professor Barry Baker organized the judging process, led by an independent panel of composers. Hong Da Chin, professor at Western Illinois University, Mara Gibson, professor at Louisiana State University, and Elaine Booby? Sorry. I guess I had not read that out loud yet. Professor at Bowling Green State University. Jan also asked her professional ensemble Bent Frequency to participate in the selection of the winner and to perform the winning work, which you may have heard. We received more than 500 entries from composers in 59 countries across 6 continents. There's only one left. If you're counting, I'm gonna get it next time. As a result, 137 new scores were added to the collection. That is a lower percentage than the call with Kaleidoscope, but I was expecting fewer submissions to the online collection since we asked composers to take the additional step and create their own accounts to participate this year. This will allow them to update or request removal of their scores on their own. I'm really excited to see if we're able to repeat the call in future years. I can't wait to see the program and collection grow. I think projects like the Contemporary Music Score Collection and what we're doing with the Davise Fund show how important it is to share the creative and scholarly works from our local communities with the world, and how valuable outreach is in reaching a diverse group of library users. Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for us? Yeah.
What was the biggest challenge you encountered in kind of establishing this to what it is today? Like the biggest, like, oh my God, I don't know if this is going to work moment.
Yeah, so I hinted at like not getting approval the first time, or I said I didn't get approval. That was probably the hardest, and I was learning to hear no, and so I heard no, and then possibly even a year or more later, a faculty member asked me, "Hey, I haven't heard any more about that project that you were working on," and I said, "Oh, I got a no." And he said, "No, you're not accepting it on this project. If I have to go talk to people, I'll go talk to people." And so that's when I thought I need to figure out why maybe I got the no and try again. I didn't get any feedback, even though I think I asked 3 times. So that's another reason I was learning to hear the no. But then I think I figured it out, that it was this public-private partnership that was a no-go. And so the second version of it, by changing that model, I got the yes. I think that was the most difficult. Another thing that happened in the first call for scores with Kaleidoscope, we announced the call, COVID happened. We were all working from home, student employees. We weren't sure whether we were going to be able to have them work, pay them. But all of a sudden I had 2,000 scores that I had to check and upload. So I came up with a project proposal and organized students, around 30 students, and they didn't all report to me. So I was co-organizing them with a colleague. That was another challenge, but I am really proud that we were able to get all of them published within a few months. We also were able to get hours for our student employees because they still lived in Los Angeles and had to pay rent. It was a really difficult time, as you all know, if you lived in too. And this was a really fulfilling project to work on. Yeah.
For the scores that are published, you mentioned that composers had an opportunity to maintain full copyright or to do Creative Commons license. How many of them choose to do the Creative Commons license versus retaining full ownership?
I don't know, but I think that would make a nice graph. There's a lot to go through, but I think that's a good question. It is interesting to me how many choose a Creative Commons license when we're offering for them to do retain full copyright.
but I don't know the number.
And then going off of that, are there, for those who do retain copyright, do you get requests from ensembles to license it, or what is the licensing process for the scores?
That's a great question. So periodically, so it's set up in a way that their copyright is expressed on there. And so if the composer has a website, I think ensembles and performers are reaching out directly. Every once in a while, there is a composer that doesn't have a website. And so a performer will reach out to me and I will connect them with that composer. And that's, I mean, it would be nice if they all had to do that, but I think that they're making that connection. Another thing that happens is that people connect with a composer, and so they'll want to reach out to them to commission another work, a different work, or an arrangement of the work, which is nice too. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, was it common or uncommon to have multimedia works submitted, and how did your repository handle that particular challenge?
Good question. So the repository allows you to put associated data, including sound and video recordings. So some composers have added those if it's a work that has an associated video that plays behind it or something like that. And a few pieces, there was like coding for patches, and so they actually just uploaded the data that's needed to perform the work. Some composers explain that a performance requires contacting them to get those things. So eScholarship, there's good and less good things, but the data that we're able to add actually works really well for this for the most part. I had this dream of asking people to put on music XML, but that has not taken off. And you had a question too?
Well, I was just curious about the Davise fund. Are there any restrictions aside from like data publication? Our funding tends to be so specific and restrictive, and it seems like you've used it for so many disparate outcomes.
So the technical language is to support the acquisition, preservation, and another word of music since 1900. And I think we're dancing pretty widely with the words, but I also think we're not dancing that much too wide, right? We're not going too broad. Right?
Spirit of the fund.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's worth looking at the list thingy.
Oh, yeah.
So these are just kind of some of the things that we've done that seem to be still related to the goal of the fund.
Yeah.
Tangentially.
And this list was like the great grandpa of this list was created by David Gilbert, and I have worked with Callie to refine it and add some things to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That dovetails perfectly into my question. Have you stayed, I feel like you're in touch with David, but do David and Bridget understand how it's kind of taken off?
That is an excellent question. And I think David does. And I did not know what the research that you did that exposed that Bridget was really instrumental in kind of reshaping this. And so I need to let Bridget know that, because I didn't, I came into this midstream, and Kate went and did this incredible research in our kind of company files. And I didn't really understand the kind of how collaborative the vision was for creating this.
But I feel like Bridget was here for what, like 30 years, 35 years?
And now that I know this, I can really see it. Some of you probably know or knew Bridget, and she was this person that had this incredible heart for students and really wanted to support them at every turn. And I think I can see her fingerprints all over it now that I see it. Yes.
How does genre work in this? I'm thinking of New Music USA in particular. I think as part of their recent diversity initiatives, they really expanded their concept of what new music is. Would you fund someone's singer-songwriter album if it was awesome?
Absolutely. So this touches on the technical aspect of what the fund is limited to. So I keep saying music since 1900, and technically it says composer since 1900. And when Kate, you mentioned this kind of expanding of it to the outreach I did to get musicologists and ethnomusicologists involved, I thought, let's not. My opinion is that all music has a composer, and so let's take this word that's so meaningful to people out of it, and let's just talk about music. Everyone at UCLA is in the School of Music. I wanted them all to see themselves in the Davise Fund, so I stuck with the word that is branded for the school. So no, we don't really have. The limitation is 1900, not style or genre. And when I first was reaching out, I think I pointed out like that very thing. I said something like regardless of style or genre. Anything else? Thank you all.
All right, I think it's time. Is everybody here?
You get one of this
For the most part? All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Taylor Greene. I'm the Chair of Research and Instructional Services and still the Performing Arts Librarian at Chapman University. And both of those things are kind of relevant to this particular topic. And so I'm going to be talking about incorporating AI literacy into music library instruction, and normally have a tendency to just talk quite a lot and use it my entire time. So this time I embedded it into the presentation to actually have some discussion. So let's try and do that, and we'll try and keep it not too long. I'm just gonna put these all up. So essentially what I like to do is, I don't feel like I'm necessarily the expert on AI, although I have some experience with it, but I'm hoping that by having a discussion about what we're all doing with it and sharing my experience will kind of go towards some best practices or trying to think through these issues of incorporating generative AI into music library instruction. I'll talk about my experience. I teach my music instruction is a little bit strange because many of you've heard me talk about this course I teach before. I teach two courses that kind of take the place of library instruction for undergraduate and graduate students at Chapman. And so, but I'll talk about how I incorporated generative AI into that. But also, since I'm the chair of research and instructional services for the university, I also have to do this for all kinds of other departments and people on campus and things. And then we'll have time at the end. I have a bunch of questions, hopefully some discussion. So this is one of the slides. First of all, we're talking about AI literacy, so it's probably important to kind of talk about what that means. But this is one of the slides I use for the presentation I give, to any kind of group of people, including the music students, just to kind of set the ground for what we're talking about. So AI literacy, and I'll just go ahead and give credit. I stole this from, I think her name is Nicole Henning. Anyway, so AI literacy is the ability to understand the basics of how AI works, to use AI effectively and ethically, and teach others to do so, and to make informed decisions about using AI technologies. So why do students need this? I'm sure probably you've thought about this, or maybe it's obvious already, but not a bad thing to just say out loud. So the main thing is that, AI has had a huge impact on the way people find, use, and create information. So those are information literacy activities and skills and things that we, have to figure out how it's going to impact those. And also, we anticipate that students are going to be expected to have some familiarity with generative AI in the workplace once they graduate. Maybe not necessarily music performance students, but students in general, and maybe those too. I don't know. And then I like to remind groups, whoever I'm talking to, that, this, especially, I talked to a lot of folks last year in the fall semester when there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding, or maybe just like a lack of understanding at the time about what generative AI was going to mean. Just that we've had other technologies that changed a lot about how we, do information literacy activities. So Google, Wikipedia, the internet, and we figured those out. We didn't, we incorporated those into our information literacy and information practices, and we'll do that with generative AI too. So students need guidance to develop useful and ethical information behaviors, to contextualize the information they receive from AI, to verify the facts and analyze the authority of sources, and to think critically about the use of AI in their work. So I know this is one area that varies widely from institutions, but at Chapman, we've had the university widely has taken a cautiously or has cautiously embraced AI rather than kind of trying to reject it, which I think is the smart thing to do. And so the perspective of the university has been to just kind of face the issues and try and get ahead of it, and to empower faculty and students with tools and knowledge to use AI critically. Just basically use it as an opportunity to enforce critical thinking. And but at the same time, letting the faculty decide. There are many faculty who have tried to incorporate, AI into their courses in various ways, and others who just say, I'm just going to not deal with this. And it's really up to them, fundamentally. And we have several tools that include AI that the university has subscribed to, like Copilot, which is the Microsoft ChatGPT, basically an AI chatbot. Adobe Firefly is a image generation AI tool. And then Grammarly's had all kinds of things where they've integrated generative AI into their services. The university also has an AI task force, which they started last summer, or I guess summer of 2023, where they were attempting to, figure out what this approach was going to be and how they were going to address it with the university at large. And one of the products of that was, the faculty were asking, how do we address generative AI in our syllabi? And so I was on a sort of sub-task force for these syllabus statements that the faculty could choose or adapt. But so to have some options of how to address generative AI in their syllabi. So the university came up with this AI hub, which is meant to be kind of like an educational resource for the campus community, mostly for the faculty, but also for anybody, and includes things like those syllabus statements, but also just information on learning more about AI and its impact in higher education. And the library's been pretty heavily involved all along. And so actually the dean of the library has been on the university-wide task force. And then my colleague, Doug Decco, who's the assistant dean for library research and data services, he and I work together a lot and have been for, the last 2 years or so. On all these, we give all kinds of presentations, as I mentioned, to, faculty, students and whatnot, and usually do it together. He takes the perspective, he's a computer scientist, and then usually I'm coming at it from an information literacy perspective. And one of the things I oversee that's also not music, but part of the other work I do is the first year foundations course, which is a series of courses that all first year students have to take. There's a built-in information literacy component in that. And so we've embedded AI into that as well. And we actually had an AI in higher education LibGuide before the university kind of got their AI hub going as a resource for faculty and students to learn about generative AI. We ended up changing it, so now it's an AI literacy guide, which honestly we don't really use that much anymore. It became apparent we were basically doing the same thing that the wide university one was trying to do, and so we ended up just changing it. I'll give you kind of an idea of what we cover in our presentations, and again, this is for not just music students, but also including music students. So we cover AI literacy and try and give a background on the technology and how it works, and demystify some of these things, like what is a generative pre-trained transformer? Most people don't have any idea what that means, even though it's part of ChatGPT. Machine learning, deep learning, those kind of
those kind of terms are kind of hard to figure out, I think, if you don't have somebody like my colleague Doug to make it easy to understand. We dig into a lot of the issues with generative AI and with potential issues, including we spend a long time talking about the potential for bias in the training data and how that could potentially affect the information you get from these technologies. And then we talk about prompt engineering or just being, thoughtful about the prompts that you put in and how that'll affect what you get out. And then you can see a couple of examples from, when we've talked to art students, or the data visualization that was for a food science class, which that was my colleague. I don't know how to do the histogram and ChatGPT, but I do know how to do image generating for an art student. And so this is one of the slides, again, we use for all classes, and talking about just, what are some of the ethical ways to use generative AI? And it does vary by course and discipline. We talk to English students, English graduate students, and their concerns are considerably different from, just sort of like, because their students are supposed to be writing, they're supposed to be grading their writing. Anyway, so an ethical use, I think or the one that seems sort of least controversial for using something like ChatGPT is to generate ideas. And, when you're just staring at a blank page and you're supposed to write a paper on something that you just started learning about 8 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, you can use it to generate research questions. Or if you have a research question, you can build upon that and pull it apart into different subtopics, things like that. And you can use it for generating keywords or finding Library of Congress subject headings to help you search. And when it's appropriate, you can use it for writing help, creating outlines for how you're going to present your information, things like that, or for a student to upload their own text and get some feedback on that. In any class, even if it's not a music class, I always give the same example, which is this one that's linked here at the bottom. I'm not going to actually open up the link, but I'll tell you just what it is. So I take the position of I'm a student in a music history class, and I don't know anything about the Baroque guitar, but I want to learn something about it, and go from just through a series of prompts, starting with what would a music history college professor ask about the Baroque guitar, and trying to get more sophisticated questions than if I just said, tell me about the Baroque guitar. And so getting some research questions to get started, and then building on those research questions into picking one and then getting more ways to approach that topic. And then getting keywords to research the topic, and then actually getting a Boolean search, and then finally finding an article and getting the abstract and asking for a research question that would build on the research from that abstract. So again, something we talk about with every class is, unwise or maybe not so good ways to use ChatGPT, which most people are already familiar with, but it's important to address. Obviously, completing entire assignments is what all the faculty are afraid of, and students do anyway, but we don't want them to. We say it's unwise to generate bibliographies and finding sources. There are some tools that do this, like, Elicit and Perplexity and stuff like that. But we already have library resources. So, that's kind of the bottom line is you already have a better system to find your sources. This isn't really the best tool to use them. And then rewriting text, like changing your tone or strengthening arguments. If it's not a writing class, those are usually fine examples to do, with using ChatGPT or something like that. But if it's a writing class, then it could be maybe not something you want to do. And then uploading copyrighted text is something our universities really worry about. And if you take an article that is under copyright and then you ask ChatGPT to summarize it for you, generally that's a useful way to use the tool. But if it's a copyrighted text and you're uploading it and it gets sent into their training data, then you're potentially committing a copyright violation. So then with music students, or the music conservatory more widely, the way that I've brought generative AI to them is going to faculty meetings and talking about a lot of the same things I just addressed, but then taking their specific questions and things that they're worried about, and then giving a few music examples, which I'll show you in a minute. And then, as I mentioned before, including generative AI in the music information literacy
and research methods for performers courses that I teach. And then once in a while it comes up when I'll have a research consultation with a student or a faculty member where it'll be an appropriate tool to use and do that. This is a module. I actually don't use this module as of this semester, but for a long time I was using these modules in my music information literacy class. So you can see kind of where I've incorporated into our unit on doing research. So we had an in-class lecture about generative AI, and then a fact-checking ChatGPT in-class assignment. I think that just stopped working again. Just talk loudly again. And then also a ChatGPT, just like for research page, and then some other things going on. So in the lecture, similar things to what we've already talked about. Some of the music examples that I usually give for students are, building a recital program using ChatGPT. I mean, you're probably not going to keep what it gives you, but it might give you another way to generate ideas. And I have an example here. I'll show you that in just a moment. And something I was a composition major many years ago, and I was always terrible at coming up with titles for things. I would have appreciated a tool that could help me come up with titles for compositions. So those are two of the examples for music students. And then in the in-class assignment, I'll have students come up with a research question, one that they've already used in a previous assignment or not, but they enter their research question and ask for a short essay, and then they fact check it with Pro Music Online. And then we have another assignment that I'll show you in a second. And then they have a module assignment where they have to, that's about developing research questions, and I'll show you how they can use ChatGPT, but don't have to. So this is an example if you want to try and use ChatGPT to build a recital program. This was actually over a year ago, so I don't, it's gotten better since then, but actually it did a decent job. I asked for a recital program for a senior recital, and I said, I want works with Renaissance, Baroque, etc. And it came up, they're all real guitar works. It would be a good program. I don't know how your guitar students are, but the Chapman guitar students couldn't play at this level. But they're real works. Roland Beyond's in the modern era is not something I would expect a undergraduate to play. And the Koyan Baba is about 16 minutes, so this would be a long recital. But they're real works. Here's the assignment about coming up with a research question. You don't have to read all this text. I know it's kind of a lot on there. But the important thing is they're supposed to come up with 3 research questions. They start with a topic, like I give the example of CPE box cello or a concerto for cello in A minor. And then we've just talked about before that how to develop a research question into a more productive, search or more productive sort of thing to use for research. And so they can either come up with their own, or they can use ChatGPT to come up with research questions, and then they say whether or not they got something different out of that than they would have come up with on their own. And I've had students say both things. Sometimes they say same kind of research questions I would have already done, and others said it came up with new ways to approach this topic I didn't think of. And then in my individual meetings, so both these are the classes that I just had. Both of these were this semester, because that's as far back as I could remember. And I had already talked to these classes about generative AI, and then was meeting with individual students. One was a music VA student working on a thesis, and was really trying to make some kind of connection between the construction of the piano and the Japanese koto, and it was hard to kind of figure out where's your through line for this research topic. So we asked ChatGPT, and it gave some ideas. I still don't think it was the strongest research, topic, but it helped us to kind of pull together these things that the student was interested to see if there was some possibility. And then I'm branching into dance here. I know this somewhat in a different field, but this student had a really interesting question. She had some intuition that there was some connection between these 3 performances, between Madonna's Vogue in 1990, Lady Gaga's Paparazzi in 2009, and Chappell Roan's at VMA at the 2024 VMA. And she felt like there was some way to connect these, and that they were saying something similar, but I was having a hard time articulating it. So we asked ChatGPT, how can we kind of connect these things and talk about them in some way? And it didn't lead to what she ended up with as a research question, but it gave us some starting ground to have a conversation. And it's helpful. And then I had a faculty member come to me and she was an adjunct, so hadn't been at the full faculty meeting where I discussed generative AI with the full-time faculty and wanted to get the same information. And at the same time, she was about to start an article on the accordion and country music. And so I said, why don't we just put this in, it was a encyclopedia article, and just see what kind of outline you get. And so we tried that out and she was impressed, and also said, obviously it wasn't as good as what she could do, but, it gives a starting place for, saving you a little bit of time in your outline at least. And then I can't remember if it was the same instructor or a different one, but came to me with asking if there was, some way to use or to kind of avoid students completing their assignment with generative AI because they'd seen it a few times. So we took the assignment and we uploaded it to ChatGPT and said, how can I redo this assignment with similar learning outcomes in a way that'd be more difficult to complete with generative AI? It's a tool against itself. And it gave some interesting ideas for how you might do that. There's a few areas where I feel like I really need to explore more, but haven't yet. The AI music generating tools like Suno AI, Wave Tool, Ava, Sounddraw, etc. I'm sure there's many more. And then AI powered research assistants like Elicit and Perplexity, Research Rabbit. I've seen these used in other disciplines. I don't know how well they work for performing arts disciplines, but those are areas that I'm curious to hear if anybody has experience with those. So if you have any questions, you can ask those, and then otherwise I'll go on to the questions for seeing what your experience is. Anybody want to start with any other questions first? How much time how did I do? Oh, great. All right. We have lots of time.
Oh, we have one question here.
Oh, yes.
I'll ask a question just about how you, in terms of music generating AI. One question I had is maybe what do you see for the potential to use generative AI in the music practice room? What ways could that, maybe future ways that might be a practice room assistant or something?
Yeah, I'm sure that's, so I feel like I haven't really settled on, or I don't know, I guess. I'm curious to see how these things will work out. But I think that the faculty, in some ways are still so hesitant about using generative, music generating tools that I'm sort of hesitant to introduce them also. And I also think it's not quite, where my role is with talking to the students about music research and stuff. So I don't know. I'd say if anybody else has an idea, I'd be interested to hear that too. But I'm not sure. I know what's his name? Woody Callahan gave a presentation at MLA 2024 about these music generating tools and walked through a few of them. And they were sort of like composition tools, but a lot of them, like one thing he pointed out is that a lot of them create sort of like soundtrack or background music. They're not creating art music. So I'm not sure.
My thought was to ask the AI to write you an etude that focuses on a particular technical difficulty or something like that.
Yeah, as far as I know, there's no tool at that level yet. You could ask it to generate something probably like with a mood or like a particular instrument kind of thing, and then use that and build off of it. But I don't know of any that can do that level of sophistication.
Are there any of these tools that are spitting out like music notation yet, or is it usually just audio?
I don't know of any that do music notation, unless anybody else does. I only know the ones that create audio, like Suno AI and stuff like that. Yeah. I could see that being a really difficult challenge for programming. Yeah. So I'm sure it's going to happen at some point. Yeah.
As part of the ethical concerns with regard to AI, do you touch on the environmental impact that AI has? So that students are aware that every time that they request something from ChatGPT, it does have an environmental impact.
Yeah, we do that with the lengthier classes we have when we have time to, address multiple topics besides just not cheat with it. That's one of those areas that a lot of students have never considered before at all. And I think that I don't remember what it is, but my colleague Doug, he had like how much water gets used every time you do a ChatGPT. It's like a teaspoon every time you do a search or something like that. That's used to cool the servers.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, what does anybody else know about, or if you have like any role in this, what your position, your university's position or policy is on generative AI?
I can speak from a popular music institution. Most of the faculty are scared about the future of modern composition and especially modern audio for popular music in particular, of having replacements for some of the work that they do outside of their faculty positions. And so many of them are very hesitant towards using AI and are consistently asking for tools to detect AI in student work, whether it's lyric work or composition work, as well as for essay work, as many of our students are performers and less interested in the research side.
Yeah.
And so most of the admin is focused on detecting AI and encouraging students not to, or creating assignments that don't allow for AI cheating.
Yeah. Yeah, and detection is not one of those areas that really works all that well, which is, a lot of faculty ask for that, but it's just not really effective to run it through a tool and detect AI. None of them work that well yet.
Yeah, they can give a percentage of probability of
Yeah.
like how often or how likely is it that AI was used, but it's not an exact science.
Right, yeah. Does anybody else know? Thank you. Anybody else know what the university's position is on generative AI?
Our institution, the little tiny teaspoon that I know about it, is that they're encouraging people to learn as much as they can, and they've been setting up sort of AI sandboxes or AI sort of learning commons, so that people can just like jump in and sort of develop like communities of practice around different uses of AI.
Okay.
And that's kind of as much as I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I was curious if anybody had like just don't use it kind of policy at their institution. So I'm glad to hear that's I think that's unrealistic, which most people I think realize. Yeah. See how much time we've got. We got a few minutes. I'd like to know what is it? Is anybody else doing any of this kind of work? And do you want to share like how you've talked about generative AI with students, and music students, or any other group? It's a new area. Yeah.
So I didn't mean to work with students with ChatGPT, but just last week they were using ChatGPT and then said, they wanted to find, I don't remember, a detail from an album that wasn't in the liner notes, and so they asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT told them, and then they said, "Where did you find that?" And they said, Music Brains or another one of the Discogs. And I was like, oh, that's cool, but I think Google would have gotten you that too.
Right, yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting. Then we had kind of a nice conversation about like what ChatGPT could do and what it can't do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of problematic to use it like Google because it's, students think that it's doing the same thing. It's looking for text and just giving that to you, but it's not doing that. It's coming up with a new response based on probability. So the correct answer often comes out because those words occur a lot in the training data together. And that's what's generated based on probability. But sometimes it doesn't know the answer and it'll just come up with something that looks probable anyway. Sorry, Ray, I think of. Anyway. Yeah.
An unrelated question. When you're doing instruction for AI and showing students sort of the unethical approaches or the faults of AI, do you show them some of those examples or use any of the real world examples? For example, that lawyer who used AI and was nearly disbarred because it had a non-existent court case that he had cited, as like showing one of the potential failures.
Yeah. Yeah, when we're talking about, that it's not the best tool to, come up with, if you need a fact that you need to know is true, it's not a good tool to use. And so in talking about using it differently than a search engine or, doing research using library resources, that example, I think a lot of students have heard that example. So it's come up a lot. We don't necessarily, I don't think it's embedded in our slides or anything, but it's definitely touched on it many times. I've done another example where I gave students, it was an essay about a John Coltrane recording, and it sounded very, it was about, I think, I can't remember now, it was last year. Anyway, but they had to try and figure out if it was true, what ChatGPT had come up with using the Grove Online article and this other article that I'd found for them to use and fact check. And in what it found is it wasn't true. It even gave examples for a real article, but then just that fact was not found within that article. And we have 1 minute left. Should it go on? All right. So is anybody using generative AI anywhere else in their work? Yes, Steve?
I've been trying to find ways to incorporate it in ways that make sense for me and my workflows. And that was challenging in the past, but I've recently discovered that, among other things, AI is a really great tool to help me answer the question, is this item out of print? As we know, that's not always an immediately easy question to answer. There are telltale signs across the internet, like, well, I'm not seeing it across these vendors' sites, but AI has actually been very helpful in helping me immediately, more clearly, and, kind of comprehensively answering that question.
What tool are you using?
ChatGPT. I switch between ChatGPT for at home or more personal things. Work-based, CalArts is actually, because we're a Google partnering school, we now use, I think it's called Gemini. And that's actually really great for us because through whatever agreement we have with Google, Gemini is not collecting any CalArts members' data or questions. So it's not really learning from the stuff we input. Which makes people feel a little safer.
Yeah.
I had a situation where UC kind of decided that they were going to put Gen AI into my work, whether I liked it or not. In the musicology department, we had like a town hall meeting on Zoom, and we had a graduate student who was not in the Zoom meeting, but because they had been invited to the Zoom meeting, they had, do you know where I'm going with this? With Otter AI. I don't know if anyone else has experience with this tool. It's like a tool for accessibility, or it's intended to be a tool for accessibility, that it will take meeting notes for you and it will real time transcriptions. And so this town hall happened. I wasn't even there. And then I got an email that was like, Otter AI is sending you this detailed description of what happened in this meeting, even though the person who has the accommodation to need Otter AI was not actually present in the meeting. It will just join the meeting for you and take these notes and then send them to everyone on the invite list, which obviously was very distressing, particularly in a town hall situation where, as a graduate student, you think that what you're saying is happening in a room and not being written down and transcribed. Not to mention, what does it mean for AI to be, what if they're misrepresenting what you say? What if they're misrepresenting someone's gender? There's all of these kinds of questions that had been left unanswered. But this is a tool that is being used across UC, it seems. Is that right, Matthew? So, that has definitely been. It's very weird because I understand the university's desire to not get all moral panicky and to be like, hey, we're down with the AI stuff and this is a reality of life. But yeah, it has been a little, sometimes I do get a little moral panicky. I think a little bit of moral panic is maybe okay.
Maybe hold back until the tool works a little better. We tried to use, I'm on the library's research and data services committee, and we tried to use Otter AI for our meeting minutes so nobody had to take them, and they failed. So we stopped using that tool.
I think I've also seen some things where sometimes those note-taking like Otter AI, will actually use that as part of its learning process too,
Yeah.
which can be problematic if anything that you're discussing is supposed to be closed circuit.
Yeah. Yeah.
For cataloging, we're starting to dip our toes into seeing what's going on with AI. There are some new tools that are available where you could like take a photo of a title page and table of contents and have it kind of generate a record from that. And then there's a lot of services that are generating subject headings, and those are obviously controversial for a lot of different reasons. So I am actually curious to see what it will do with music, because I have a feeling it's all been designed to deal with text, and you know that once you introduce music into that situation, it will just fall apart. But yeah, we're experimenting. We have experimentation groups.
Yeah. Yeah, I would assume it probably doesn't do well with figuring out, you know, there's two oboes and a bassoon in this. But maybe, who knows? I think I'm over time, so thank you all. I appreciate your
Now, we are now recording in progress. I would like to now introduce our plenary speaker, Dr. Ray Knapp. Raymond Knapp is a distinguished professor of musicology, disability studies, and humanities, and is currently serving as vice chair and director of graduate studies in the Department of Musicology. He is also the inaugural director of the UCLA Center for Musical Humanities and has served as the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music as its first academic associate dean. His broad interests include classical and contemporary music, and is currently co-editing the Oxford Handbook of the Television Musical. At UCLA since 1989, Dr. Knapp is well known for his commitment to undergraduate education, having chaired the Academic Senate's Undergraduate Council, General Education Governance Committee, College Faculty Executive Committee, and WASC Reaccreditation Steering Committee. He has recently helped to develop the newly launched Disability Studies IDP and major at UCLA, and has received several awards, including the Distinguished Teaching Award, membership in the UCLA Faculty Mentoring Honorary Society, and has been selected to deliver the 138th Faculty Research Lecture in April 2025. Please welcome Dr. Raymond Knapp.
Is this going to work for me?
Yeah, it is working.
Oh, okay, it's hard to tell. So thank you for having me. I will say that when I first got Casey's email and I said, "Oh, this is the right name and that," and she mentioned Matthew, and so I wrote to Matthew, says, "What's all this about?" And he says, "Well, I thought you could talk about the center," and that was interesting to me because it's typically generous. Come and talk about the center and not talk about the library at all at UCLA. But of course, actually talking about the center means talking about the library. And I immediately started thinking back. I've been here at UCLA for 35 years. And I was thinking about all the different times when I've collaborated with different librarians in the music library. And so this is really going to be about that larger topic, but then we will move to how the library has supported the center over the last 8 years or so that it's existed. So first thing I did is I gave this title, and it was a temporary, but it's turned out to be the title for what I'm doing, as often happens. But I added a word when I was putting this together. So assuming this will actually work, do I have to click? It's not advancing. Ah, there we go. Just waking up. I added music librarians as collaborators. I have, in fact, worked sometimes with other librarians on campus, but I've always been a little afraid of librarians, which is why I was wondering what was going on here. And it was actually useful for me to think about all the times I've gotten real help from librarians, and so that was really important to me to just put that back in. It was the music library that made that possible for me. So I start by breaking this down by the different things that I do, so that this can be sort of the context for how the collaborations came to be, because mostly they connected with things I did, at least at the beginning. mostly. So these are like the three areas in which we are judged, right? The teaching, research, and service as a faculty member. And each one of these has been an important area of collaboration in one way or another. So in teaching, the libraries, of course, always supported teaching in really important ways. So this is not about that. This is about actual projects that I worked on together with the librarians at various stages to support GE courses in a new way. And in later years, also having to do with some of the mentoring that I've done with students who have also developed collaborations with the library. Research, the most important element that I'll talk about briefly is book websites that the library has helped me develop. And in terms of service, the American Musicological Society Council, which I served on for 3 years, I was able, with the help of the then librarian, to develop a fair use policy for the well, I'll get to that for the AMS, and eventually they actually adopted it and kept almost all of my language, which was kind of amazing. And then in the later years, well, most of the time I've been at UCLA, it's not that later anymore. I've been putting on a fair number of events as department chair and as director of the center. And it's in that area that I think Matt really wanted me to talk about, but I'll get to that. But there's a lot that came before that and kind of made that seem a very natural development. So I'm going to center on 4 figures who have been really important to our library, and for me at least, Stephen Davison, Gordon Thiel, David Gilbert, and Matthew Vest. You overlapped with David, right? Yeah. So with Stephen, I developed scrolling analyses of audio reserves, which this is back in the 90s before people were doing that. And it was at first, we really don't know how we could possibly do that. And we figured out a way. And of course, a couple of years later, that became completely, not the way it was done anymore, but it was an important first step. And similarly for the websites for books, my websites tend to be examples of musical examples and video examples and other things. No, you don't need my website to find these things instantly online. So all of this stuff is the dark ages in some ways, one of the gradually enlightening ages. Gordon helped me extend what had already been a really healthy commitment to fair use in terms of allowing access to students to recordings of music other than just coming in and listening to them in the library, which is a very taxing, a big taxation of resources. So he was always very aggressive about, we can do this, and we did it. And of course, there's never a challenge to it. And so I went naturally to him when I wanted to do something for the AMS. And I'll talk about that in a moment. David Gilbert, I think, was I credit, maybe I'm wrong about this, with really opening up the library to all sorts of things, creating spaces for exhibits that were tied to things that we were doing, and having various, some of them fairly regular and some of them quite special events in the library, including concerts and other kinds of gatherings. And then Matthew, when he was here for a few years, I think, before the center started, but almost immediately was offering the library as a space to be thinking about whenever we put on events. And we did. We used it, as you'll see in some of the pictures I'll share with you. And exhibits, and yeah, so we'll see some of that from Kate in the back. One example, but the fairly recent one. And in a very general sense, to open up the library's resources to something that's in the last few years become, I think, an important consideration of what musicologists do, which is public musicology, of things that we are not just among ourselves, not just directed more broadly among ourselves, but actually to anyone that we can bring to a richer understanding of the music that of course everyone loves, we all love. So let me start with Stephen Davison and what we did together. scrolling analyses before there were scrolling analyses, basically. So I brought in these course guides that I developed when I first started teaching the course on Beethoven. Eventually, we did this also for Mozart, the 2 GE courses that I taught for a long time. Those are the courses I taught for big groups of people. And the idea originally was, well, you listen to the recordings that we had on reserve, and you pay attention to where you are in the recording. So you had to have a timer, and you would just, listen through this, and you would be able to hear the things that I described. So it was a way to entrain people to actually hear the form in real time. And it worked reasonably well. This is not something I pioneered at all. It's something that I, found in music appreciation books at the time. So I came to Stephen and said, is there any way that we can have this on the screen while they're listening to this? Because we were going to the digital, already moving to digital recordings. And he said, well, no, I don't think we have the bandwidth for that. So we ended up with this using something, I think it was probably QuickTime originally, this rather, but they had to reconfigure the amount of bandwidth used for music and the amount used for the video. So they used very little for the video because it was just a picture of a screen that gradually moved and highlighted a different line. And so the wizards in I think it was in YRL here who actually developed this for us. And we entered every single one of these, and I do a lot of music in that course with these things so that you would listen to the music and it would highlight where you are in the music. And it worked really well. And so this was, we remember actually meeting in a place and explaining what we were doing, and we were so excited about it. And of course, a couple of years later, well, we didn't need it anymore because these things are available now. You can actually read the scores while it's happening, things like that. Anyway, we used those for many years, even when they became a bit outmoded because it was easier. And it used to be something that they would have to use on campus. When someone told me they were able to do it at home, I said, "Oh, that can't be." This was a while ago, and we couldn't at home on a modem ever do something like this, but soon we were all doing it. Anyway, so that's how that developed. And when I wanted to develop a more extensive website for book on musicals that I developed as a GE course at UCLA, I went again to Stephen to do this, and he got a grant. We worked together with, he worked mainly in between, but we worked also with the Center for Digital Humanities, or whatever it was called then. Humanities Computing it's called now, I think. Yeah, keeps changing. And so we got some money to do this with, and we developed these websites for my music books. First, of course, for the one on the left, the American Musical and the Formation of National Identity. And then a year later, I finished the 2 books together were the course that I'd been teaching with a lot of expansion, but basically those books. So it was actually a pretty easy matter. And my eventual partner in crime with the Center for Musical Humanities, Holly Raploga-Wong, was my graduate student at the time. In fact, I've known Holly since she was a freshman at UCLA. So she helped me put them together in terms of actually putting them to the website and doing all of the work with that. And now she's the program director for the Center for Digital Humanities and teaches this course, which I hardly teach anyone. And eventually we use these also for a later book that I came out a few years ago around while you were here. But the one that really mattered was getting it right the first time. And I think we did pretty well with the American Musical, judging by the reviews and something else. So one of the reviews points out, in the review, in keeping with Knapp's focus on music, that he has found an efficient technology-based way to let readers hear the musical examples he discusses in his book. Readers can listen to the portions of songs Knapp analyzes by accessing the website run through UCLA where Knapp teaches. I put this on, I highlight this because this was always called out. At this point, it wasn't typical. People were doing things like including CDs at the back of books, if you remember that practice. Or they were, doing other things, connecting this. But this had really never been done for music text. There were websites with visual examples for other kinds of books. Different kinds of things were happening, but I don't think this was new. And so Stephen helped me with that. And this is the one book that I've written that has won an award, so let me put that up. A citation for the George G. Nathan Award for Dramatic Criticism. I had no idea this award even existed. It's kind of an English department award or a Critics for the New York Times award more than anything else, but somehow or another they got my book out of the press second to them, I'm sure. And again, they highlighted the technical savvy, which is not me at all. My examples are clear, maybe. Links online to audio examples, thereby connecting, and this is their phrase, temporality to the information. Super high. Yeah, this is a decade later after the website for the courses that we developed. So, yeah, maybe I would have won the award anyway, but I don't know. Any piece of candy helps. But I remember in the review, she was skeptical that people would actually go through and listen to each example, but they don't understand how much fun that is, especially then, because it was fairly new. People did, and it was very heavily used. It doesn't work anymore. The website's gone. I tried to figure out what happened to it, and I couldn't, because after all these years, one reader wanted to know if the website could be, updated. And no, it couldn't, but that's one reader. And this book is used in courses. So it's not as if it's no longer needed. It's really funny how these wonderful moments are moments. And the moment is something else. Anyway, but Stephen is very dear to me for all of those helps. He moved, I think, to Powell Library and eventually elsewhere. He was always he was a restless person, which is why I knew he was the right person to go to for these. Gordon, who was there all that time as well, and had, as I said, been very active in helping to assert fair use. So when I got on the council, a colleague of mine, Mitchell Morris, recently retired, who had been on the council already, had taken on the task of developing a fair use and dropped it because, well, Mitchell didn't always finish things. So he handed me his big notebook of things that he had done and no prose whatsoever toward getting together a statement on fair use. And I wrote up some of the history, some of the law in which copyright depends historically, as being a historian, which is very different from what we now think of as copyright. Copyright translates for most people into intellectual property rights. It's not what it was. And it's on the basis of an older understanding of copyright that fair use became a thing. So I had many conversations with Gordon about this. I wrote something up. I ran it by him, and he actually consulted with colleagues in the MLA, and just to sort of make sure that this is something that was going to work. And they came up, the AMS did, with best practices. This is their title, in the fair use of copyrighted materials in music scholarship. So one of the reasons we really wanted to do this was because people were afraid, presses were afraid to commit to putting a musical example in a book and then somehow have to pay the price later because they weren't allowed to do it. This is a deep fear in publication. It still exists in the UK big time. Although Oxford, because they're based in the United States, they can be convinced, and they can be convinced partly because we have this statement and we can point to it. And it's been there now for a long time, and well, 14 years, and nobody's ever things. So practice is really important for fair use. But the practices before we came up with the statement were that if you quoted a scrap of lyric, you had to get permission and cite at the end of it. And I wasn't doing that. And originally when I wasn't doing it, I did other things. Like I would highlight words in the text that are given musical emphasis. So it was a musical analysis. It wasn't a textual analysis, right? So this is how we sort of started doing that. But nobody cares. That's the secret about this. We're writing books for ourselves. Who cares? So they come to our classroom and say, "You can't put that up on the screen. That's a lyric that I wrote. You don't have my permission." So, I mean, that's just not the way that fair use works. And so we developed a thing, and I think I have this up. So let me see. This is the center. Yeah, here it is. Let me make it bigger. Let's get rid of this stuff. I don't want to do all this. You see, I mean, this is me. This is not the technical savvy person that you're thinking me to be. Well, I can just describe it a little bit. So they, in the end, for a long time, I thought they sort of got rid of all that history I did, but eventually they put it in, where I talked about how fair use happened. I had lots of source work that Mitchell had actually done a lot of that work for me, and I was just able to kind of distill it into a quick statement of overview of why there was such a thing as copyright and how fair use came to be an adjunct to it. As an exception to copyright. And, this is something you can find online very easily, and you'll see when you do that, it gives you the whole apparatus of fair use, which is very simple and yet also very vague. So this is why practice matters so much, in a kind of collective agreement about what you can do matters so much, because if you did have to go to court, that's something that you could point to and say, well, this is how we do it. And we've been doing it for whatever, many years. We had a good model in the cinematic realm, so we use some of those. But one of the things I was really shocked that they kept intact, because, I always like to push a little harder than I think people will actually go along with, which comes in handy because sometimes you get what you push for. Like, we'll get to this, like a prom in the library, a punk prom. Sometimes you get what you ask for. So I put in case studies, and the case studies included, of course, a lot, basically all the different kinds of things that could be seen as infringements, but what we could do. And we use the language of fair use to develop this. But one of the things we pushed hard was that sometimes you could include an entire thing, because if you're talking about the form of something, you need the whole thing for people to hear that form. It's from teaching, it's from, anyone's experience. You can't just kind of dip in here and dip in there and get a sense for how that all works. So that was something that I pushed a couple of places, and they left it all in. And no one's ever said boo about it. There have been times I think it was when Oxford, this is an earlier handbook that we did with them on the American musical, and when they were concerned, they had a policy about if it's over 30 seconds, we don't really want to put that up, and as it said, well, give us a minute. And so they ended up, he agreed to a minute, and they said above a minute we would need special things. So every one of those special things was basically taking the language of this fair use statute, plugging it in and saying, yes, this applies. This applies. They bought it. So, in the end, they let us have longer examples online. So all of that has its own history. I don't know why is this back to here. Here we go. So that's that, and that I think is Gordon's help in that was just central to my being able to do it. I also asked a couple of my colleagues, but mainly just to ask them so I could say that a committee did it, because people are always more impressed if people. David, as I said, I think he did a lot, but we didn't have as many things that we did together. One thing he did help me with was when we put on a conference on the musical back in 2007. He helped put together this wonderful exhibit, part of which we had to actually have in the conference room because we couldn't leave it out anywhere else, because these are easily damaged things. And also then he also did something in the Paul Rotunda that went along with the exhibits, which is this was actually in Royce, right across the courtyard. So it was really easy for everyone. And it was really quite lovely, and some surprising things were in that he was able to find. And then gradually, also over time, he developed these various concerts and social events in the library, including when the school became a real school. And this happened way after you came, Matthew. In fact, I remember coming to you for information that we could put in the proposal for the library. I didn't put it in here, so I didn't do everything here. But Judy Smith, our founding dean, wanted to do different things to sort of bring the departments together. And well, the library was something we already shared. And so we hosted an event in the library to everyone. And I think this is where I'm not quite clear, because I know in the end you did all the work. But I somehow had David, and I think you worked together. You probably did. Yeah. And then the voice studies, one of my colleagues was put on a conference that became another handbook for Oxford on voice studies. And an amazing resource was put together as an exhibit by the library for her. This is Nina Eidsheim. So there's Matthew. You can see him, right? Yeah. This is at the celebration of the event. This is one of the participants that day, Cheryl Keyes, who from ethnomusicology and also FM. The publications, the showcase was the name they came up with it for it.
And I will say, congratulations. This is a wonderful celebration. I will drink my glass alone, but please get your glass. Thank you very much for coming.
Seems a little off with the Zoom delay, but still. Okay, so the main event, Matthew. Woo! So this really, when the CMH started, we got to know each other a little bit anyway, because musicology connections. So CMH started up just at the same time as the school did, almost as early as the school became a real school in the late teens. And we did several events that connected with the library. We had just hired Jessica Schwartz, who it wasn't even her major work at that time. Her major work was on the Marshall Islands and the nuclear work. But we were really interested in the fact that she could teach a punk course for us, and immediately started thinking, we need to do something with punk. Well, she, of course, once you give her an idea, she was over here at YRL, and she got people really interested in developing a punk archive. And so we used the center to develop a conference based on that work, which she called Curating Resistance. And I'll get to I'll show you pictures of that. And almost as an offshoot of that, we developed a series with a graduate student who's now working on their dissertation on queer punk, to do a three-part, what do you call it, just presentations, but you know, it was this kind of a thing. Bring them in to talk about what they did and how that relates to what other people do, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's really nice because it's something the center really likes to do, is to bring people in who actually do this and interact with them, and bring in composers and interview them, things like that. So that was all in the main reading room. And this is now moving into a more recent era. Last year, Pathways of Early Music Conference was almost, I think, entirely hosted within the library as a conference. And I'll have pictures to show that. So the idea of the conference was to move from historically informed performance to historically inclusive performance. And we ended up, the idea was we'd have the conference in the library and then move to the Greene room to have our after party. And we got preempted, and I just what this. So it's not like we've never had food in the library. And then most recently, the Encounters with Schoenberg and Stein, a symposium. And just last spring, one of my undergraduate advisors, Ashley Dow, who she does everything under the sun. So you knew her already very well, but she was articulately interested in the public musicology as something that we should be extending our work into, and put together a panel that included Matthew Hawley and Christy Brown Montesano, who, if you ever go to the opera or almost any musical performance anywhere in this area, she's likely to be doing the pre-concert for you. And she's absolutely wonderful at it. And she teaches for us. So she's absolutely wonderful at that too. So let's take you, this is mostly going to be sort of just taking you through some pictures, and then we can have we can ask questions if you have questions, or we can just stop, whatever. So Curating Resistance, this is a poster for that in 2018. I mentioned the Punk Archive exhibit and the Music Library's Punk Prom. I had a fancy font on Punk Prom, but clearly it didn't follow from my to my laptop. So just imagine Punk Prom. So the pictures don't lie. This was the Looney's place, and you can see all the streamers. I don't know how much of that you did yourself, but
I think I did, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, you can have a tour of the library later today, right? So you can imagine the space when you go in there as being slightly different in its configuration. Here's some over on the right are some of our graduate students, first year grad students, who are very helpful in helping us put the conference together. And green light, I guess, yeah. Here's a progression. So there are a few pictures here of Matthew. I'm not showing any pictures of me, but I can show pictures of Matthew because he got me here. Here he is wearing, I think, overdressed a bit. Maybe.
It's a prom.
Punk.
All right. But you can't see it. The shirt has paint splatters all over it.
You will see in a moment.
Okay.
That's Matt getting it. Okay. This is actually Nico, right? This is, I mean, he grows up so fast. This is Nina's son, who's activating some kind of mist machine there in the library where it can damage all the books, but never mind. I'm doing some eggs or something. Yeah, not doing much. These are some of the same graduate students. Let's see here. Most of them actually have finished at this point, and one of them was. So. And at the center is Jessica Schwartz, whose brainchild the whole thing was. And just to go on, and so this is something that I call out this 3-part series to be hosted in the main reading room. So just a quick overview of that, with the posters. 2019 fall, Janet Pup and Myriad Slits. These are their stage names, I think. And in March 2020, Michelle Cruz, Gonzalez, and Rudy Garcia. So this is March 2020. This is literally the day we held it. And as we were getting ready to have the event, we learned that UCLA was closing down. That was the last event before that happened. So the next event was not until April 2021 when we continued and finished the sequence with Just with the end date. And it's just one picture from that. We are so unfortunate. Okay. So the Pathways Conference from last fall. This is some of the things that were going on here. I thought of wearing the same shirt so you could recognize my balding head there from the back. But that's me over on the left. And that's my colleague Cesar giving a talk with Paul, his collaborator, and a lot of early music types. You can tell by the pigtail, things like that. And somewhere, I think you can see it better in this picture. Yeah, so the people who planned the conference, thanks to go around there, I'm just being able to just point. So, so this is Mary Lynn, who, along with Elizabeth Le Guin, put together the conference proposal to get funding for it. And they were, of course, doing everything as well during this. And it was great to be able to have this kind of combination of things in the library. It feels more dignified than punk maybe, but no more appropriate that's been punk. And then here's all that food that we had no home for that we could that. This is the encounters with Schoenberg and Stein, which we held in Ronnie Hall, which is right next door to the library. And this is what I don't know that I can give you close-ups, but she's here. You can ask Kate about what she put into the exhibit. You can see off to the side there. There's a picture of a big version of the poster back there, but it was right inside the front door of the library, and yeah, it's quite lovely. And this is the conference. The Muse Conference, Music and Dialogue by Ashley, and showing at the very end of the last panel. Couldn't find a picture of the three of you, but it was a great panel. All the things she puts together turn out to be quite great. Just to say, Holly, Christy, and Matthew, and that's it for me. So I can't answer questions. I can also have another website here. Let me put this up. The Center for Musical Humanities, which gives you an overview of what we've done over the years. It needs the last year isn't fully up to date yet, but the most recent thing is at the top. We have what we try to do at the center is to combine in always different ways. So we try to rethink how we do this, musical performance and musical scholarship, and bring them together in some kind of useful combination. And we've done pretty well with that. Over the years, let's see for these. Here are during the pandemic, we did a truly global conference. We did it on Sunday morning so people could tune in they did. We had more people come to that than our live events for sure, and from all over the world, and in places that would not even be able to get out of their country to join, because as you can see, it's Indo-Persian, and we had wanted to do something, but we couldn't get permission from our own State Department to do it. So this is something that we were able to do online. We did that. There's a new opera that was premiered at UCLA. We put on a conference about the historical area that it's drawing from. the opera is based on a book written by a scholar. So I mean, it kind of all goes together. On the way back to our first event, which was on Anthem. Shutter in it. Go ahead.
How have you, this is great to hear about this connection you've had for so many years. Really, really amazing to hear. What about your students? How do you encourage them to develop that some kind of relationship with the music library and their librarian?
Well, I think the real key to that has been giving people credit. I try to do that. And it's interesting because in a large class, you want to protect the library a little bit from being inundated with students. So I saw a lot of what I was doing there is keeping them out of the actual library. It's a very pretty library. They don't need to be told it's a nice place to go to. But when we started holding events and students would come to these to the events, I think they start seeing the library in a different way, and that helps them a lot. But I mean, everyone has to at some point get over that step and ask a question. And what always happens is that people are falling over to help you. So it's really it's just getting them to take that step. I think. I can't imagine that that's a problem, really. I mean, it's something that usually we have a small library. Yeah. And so we don't want to have it run over by our hundreds and hundreds of GE students. Literal, 500, writing papers coming in to ask for help, but that's a little more than the library could stand. So this is a big part of that push to go put things and resources online for people. You can't see everyone for whatever. Yeah.
Question. Having been through several iterations of music librarians, have you appreciated kind of the switchovers with each person coming in, or has that lack of consistency in a way been frustrating?
We can't wait for the next. No, I mean, every time somebody leaves, it's very sad because you develop a relationship with somebody. I've been here a long time. So it's that's what happens. It happens with everyone. Everyone kind of disappears and people take their place, and you spend a little time getting to know, work with these people, but you do. But it's usually painful when people leave. I don't think I would say with administrators, there's a big relief most of the time. And with librarians, there's more sadness. There's a big difference in who's leaving. Sure. But Gordon, I think he stayed a long time, and recently died, I think, right? Yeah. And Stephen was going to go other places. He was, we kind of could see the handwriting on the wall. He left the music library. He was still on campus. I still bothered him after that. David, I heard from just a couple weeks ago. So he's still around. I'm glad that he reached out to me. It feels good that we worked together for so many years that still presume.
Briefly showed a picture of your most recent book, or a recent book, Making Light, which I know you received a subvention to publish that open as well from the library through Tome, I think.
No, it wasn't Tome. I don't remember who it was. I mean, it was interesting. The press actually approached me, but I knew it was through the library. I actually didn't understand fully how that happened, but of course I said yes. I mean, the book is available intact with that wonderful cover. And, get the whole thing for nothing.
So my question was that have you noticed, because I assume that the listening to your earlier books was also open. Was that limited only to people that bought the book?
Yeah, that's how they made that, but it's not really. We had no gate.
Oh, okay.
We just, there's no password. I mean, how could you publish in a book a password? I mean,
So you've been working, I think, in open scholarship for some time too. Have you found that your book that's open, is that reaching different audiences? Have you heard from people that you might not have heard from otherwise?
yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know what you can ascribe those kinds of things. I mean, different things happen. I mean, somebody wrote to me and they couldn't get the book in Europe, so I just mailed them a copy. So other people get a copy of the book and they write to me and tell me what Knapp means in Finnish or something. I mean, you get all sorts of different kinds of responses, but I think the main thing that because it is used as textbook, most books are used in text in classes. I don't, nobody sells them anymore. I mean, you do. I mean, I still get money. One of them was translated into Korean, and I'm getting royalty checks for them again. But you don't write books for royalty checks, at least I don't. So yeah, you want them to be read, you want them to be used. This is why libraries are wonderful, because they don't get paid to take a book out of the library. I used to have this thing on my wall of someone going to, public libraries were going to ruin authorship. I'm going to quit. I'm not going to bother writing anymore because they have libraries and people can get this stuff for free, For me, that's what fair use is at bottom is, once you release something into the world, let it be in the world. And, so it would be pretty inconsistent for me to not feel that way about my own stuff. Really, I want people to read it. One of the weirdest is just 3 weeks ago. Someone wrote to me out of the blue, telling me how much he liked my dissertation and how he liked it much better than the book. I had to get that out of him later. I said, well, there's a book. I said, I like the dissertation. So who knows? I mean, that happens because you throw your stuff out there and it survives something. But we can be done soon. I teach again at 1. Thanks for squeezing me in.
Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. So I think I'm on the last official session of the day, and it's like the most interesting one. So So this, I'm giving like a little version of the presentation that Sonia Archer-Capuzzo gave as a town hall, I think in September. And it's just going over this new process for getting involved in MLA's committees and subcommittees. Let's see, going to work.
Hit the right arrow button.
No, one too many. Okay. All right. So, what is the committee management team? It's a new team within MLA that has been charged with coordinating recruitment and selection process for MLA committee members and chairs. So, I only joined this last year, but I think it's been around for maybe 1 or 2 years before that. And I guess the idea is that MLA National, the committee recruitment process has been opaque. It's been a little bit difficult for people to figure out how to get involved. I know they've been trying to get people to these get involved sessions at the conference every year, but I think each committee does things a little bit differently and it's confusing. So trying to do a little bit of harmonization and make everything a bit more transparent and inclusive.
So the team itself is charged with identifying which committees have vacancies, advertising and recruiting for those vacancies, maintaining a form that you can fill out to, show your interest in a committee appointment, and then kind of help the committee chairs if they need it with choosing committee members. But we're really not probably going to be choosing committee members for the committees. That's going to be the committee chairs. And we're supposed to be evaluating this process regularly. I have the members, the current members of the team down there at the bottom, committee on committees. So what is the process? There is a form. You can do the QR code thing to get the form if you want. And I think you can fill it out at any time. It will be shared with the committee management team, and then we would eventually share your interest with your interest form with the chairs of the committees or subcommittees that you are interested in. And again, they would be the ones who are actually selecting people to serve on the committee. Oh yeah, and so actually let's look at it. Work. So a bunch of text, you got your name, your email, what kind of member you are. You do need to be a member in good standing of MLA National to serve on any committee. But that can be, student member, honorary member. There is a bunch of little kind of demographic things that you fill out. And then here are the actual committee choices. The ones that have asterisks by them are supposed to be the ones that currently are expected to have vacancies for this upcoming term. So some of them just don't have any vacancies coming up. It doesn't mean you can't select them, but it means that, you might be less likely to get chosen to serve on that committee. There's also this wherever I am needed box that, if there's a committee that needs people and you might fit their possible selection, then you could get on that committee. And you can see how many committees we have at MLA. If you check boxes for more than one, you can list, your top choices. You could say, do you want to serve on more than one committee at the same time? And then a very short statement, 750 max characters as to, what your background is and why you wish to serve. So, okay, this one has 1,500 max, but, and then there is this section here at the bottom for other appointments that are outside of the committee structure of MLA. So being like a special officer, some kind of liaison, an editor, or a task force working group member or a board member. And I think if somebody checks these, the idea is that we might pass that name along to the people who make decisions about those kind of appointments within MLA, but our team has no, no power over those things. We are collecting interest mostly in these committees here. Okay. Next up. Okay, what if I have limited or no services experience? Great, no problem. You can totally serve an MLA. Again, as long as you're a member in good standing and you're willing to spend some of your time doing work on behalf of the organization, we are glad to have fresh perspectives. And this is where you can get that experience so that you can, maybe if you don't get your first choice of committee, then you can, get that experience and serve on the one that you're more interested in next time. And there are some appointments that are probably better for early career or student members. I think some of the awards and the awards committees are good because you're really serving for the active period is a pretty short amount of time where you're reviewing and you don't need to have any particular kind of experience to get on those committees. You just need to be able to work. All right, how do I do it? You use the new form. The deadline is going to be the business day after the end of all MLA annual meeting activities this year, which is not until March 31st. But again, you can fill it out earlier if you want to. If you're like motivated right now and you know what you want, go ahead. There's no reason to wait until March. We did just miss a deadline like 3 days ago for the committee chairs and for the nominating committee. Those need to get started a little bit earlier. So their deadline was November 1st. But this one's still going until the end of March. You do need to submit a new form every year, unless, I mean, if you're currently serving on a committee and you're not interested in serving on a second committee, then you're fine. You don't need to submit a form, but this will completely replace any other process there was for applying to committees. So I know for the cataloging and metadata committees, we always did, just write someone an email saying, I'm interested in this, and this is my background. We're not going to be doing that anymore. We're going to be going through this process. This is going to be the unified MLA committee application process. Let's see. So this is the slide about sharing, which again, we've just barely missed the deadline if you were really dying to chair a committee. But I think the sharing process is probably a little bit different than applying for committees, because usually a lot of these committees are going to choose a chair that has already had experience on serving on that committee, probably recently. And that there may be a little bit more kind of encouraging a certain person to fill out their form to be chair of a committee. But yeah, and then the early deadline also applied for the nominating committee, since they need to get their work done earlier in the year. All right, I think this was the slide where during the town hall we had people come and talk a little bit about, why you'd want to join or chair a committee in MLA. And yes. There we go. So it is a really good way to get involved in the organization. I know that the advice that I always give people who are sort of like scared of getting involved in the committee structure is just to go to a committee meeting and hang out. They're usually open. I mean, I know they're all online now. It's a little harder to sort of mingle than it used to be when they were in person. But usually the committee meetings are all open on Zoom, and you can go, you can ask questions, you can observe what kind of work they're doing, and you can get an idea for if this is something that you'd be interested in getting involved in or not. There is a lot of variety in workload and schedule. Some of them have like a lot of concentrated work in one part of the year. Others have, little bits of work spread out throughout the year. Some of them are heavier in general. And let's see, so the search committees are generally kind of a few months, but more concentrated in that time. I think the awards committees are somewhat similar, although I've never served on one of those. My experience is mostly on cataloging and metadata subcommittees, so those tend to be a fairly heavy workload, and they also tend to require a little bit more, a little bit of experience. Like they don't require that you really know everything about what the committee is going to be doing, but that you're at least like familiar with it enough that you'd be able to contribute to the discussions. And it's recommended to speak to the current chair to find out more, or to go to one of those get involved sessions that they have at MLA National. Yeah, I know, just speaking for myself, that some of the most meaningful work I've done in my whole career has been through MLA committees. That I was lucky enough to be part of the committee that was working on the medium and performance terms and the genre form terms when those were being created. And it was a lot of work. It was probably, I was doing more work on that committee than I was doing in my job. But we actually produced a final thing that went out there into the world that is now used by everybody who catalogs music. And that was really exciting. So yeah, definitely like a worthwhile thing to have participated in. And I'm really glad that I did it. So I do recommend getting involved in MLA if you are interested. Let's see, am I guaranteed a place? No, some of them have limited or no vacancies, and some of them have, a higher interest in the number of people that might want to be part of it. But with this form, you can, pick more than one, so that maybe if you don't get into your first choice, you might be considered for your second or third. And if you really don't get into anything, then there are other ways to get involved, like interest groups and editing one of the publications and running for the board and all kinds of things. If you do fill out the form and then your situation changes, you're no longer, able or willing to serve on a committee, it's totally fine. You can just shoot an email to the email address and, no problem. You're not signing away your life here. Okay, and then these are once again links to the interest form. There's also the webpage for the team and the FAQs. Probably covered just about everything that I tried to talk about. But it is here for you. And I think that's it. So I'm happy to try to answer questions if you have any questions. Hamar.
First of all, I think this is great that it's sort of there's a committee that's overseeing this process and centralized. And hopefully there'll be an opportunity to disseminate information and get more people involved. I do have a couple of questions. I'm the outgoing chair of the Dina Epstein Award Committee. So one question, you said that this completely replaces the other sort of selection procedures. So for that committee, perhaps for other award committees, historically there's been a statement of interest that has been requested and also a CV. And I think just like pushing back slightly on the idea that you don't have to have any experience to sit on the awards committees, I think one place where it comes out where you have to make hard calls is when, there's one opening and there's more than one person. You have to have a basis on which to choose someone. And so the basis sort of on which one of the bases is for that awards committee is your experience with doing research in American music, because that's what the award is for. So you have to be able to assess that, the viability of the applications, and kind of there's a fair bit of it's helpful to have background having done the research. Or so without that, I think it would be really difficult to choose among candidates. So is there a way to maybe modify this slightly to ask for a bit more information, or
yes,
a different kind of statement?
That's a good question. So I wasn't part of the team while they were designing the form, so I was a little bit out of the loop for how decisions were made. I think it was difficult to figure out a one size fits all form because some committees really need almost no information and other ones need more. And I know that they specifically included CMC cataloging and metadata people to make sure that our bases were covered, but I think they couldn't have representatives from everyone. I know that I know they were hesitant to request too much information for that reason, because not everyone needs to submit a CV and a full statement of interest. But I think it would be fair to say that, some committees require more documentation than others, and that you might want to, consult the chair and see what kind of information they need. I don't think there's a place to attach something like a CV. I was looking at that. I think it's just cut and paste, because this is all going to go into the Google form.
I mean, I would recommend that perhaps this is the sort of first step, and then you can request CVs perhaps from finalists, depending on what information you can already find online. Because like you said, this is meant to be a one size fits all, but that, I don't know.
Yeah, it is a good question though. And I can follow up in our next meeting and kind of see if they have already discussed like a way for a committee chair to collect extra information to help with grading. Yeah.
So does your committee essentially pass the names of some people who've submitted to the respective committees for?
Yeah, we are just in between.
Okay.
Yeah. Intermediary.
Gotcha.
What's actually in those text boxes? Is that enough to sort of replace a statement of interest?
I think that this, I mean, that it might be for the statement of interest. I mean, if you think it could be done in about 1,500 characters, but like I said, I don't think there's a way to attach a separate document like a CV.
What is? I just can't read it. What is it asking for in those boxes?
So this one. This one is saying if you why you want to serve and what skills and knowledge you can bring to MLA in general. And then,
That's basically a statement of interest, isn't it? Same thing, kind of.
yeah, and then this one is supposed to be listing any service experience, which I guess would be, you know, like a very brief version of a CV, but not a full accounting.
And when chairs get the information, do they get all of the answers to all of this, or is it just the name and contact?
I think they would get everything.
Okay.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Just generally, is it hard at this point to recruit people to committees? Like, is membership sort of lessened?
I think I think this was mostly referring, like, kind of responding to feedback that it was confusing to the committee structure was confusing and people were having a hard time knowing how to get onto committees. I think some committees might have trouble recruiting and others don't. I really only have experience with the cataloging ones, and we always kind of get about the right number of people usually. And we're also have historically been pretty transparent about, you know, telling people exactly how many openings we plan to have and exactly how to apply. And I think some of the other committees often don't get started until kind of later in the year. And this is trying to get everybody on more of the same schedule too. But I don't really know if there's been a lot of trouble with recruitment. I know that, you know, membership is down, and that probably affects it. People are busy. And
What was the deadline again for?
March 31st.
Okay.
Can I put in a plug?
Yeah.
So I am currently the chair of the Travel Grant Awards Committee,
Oh.
and we do require a minimum of 3 people, and we're down to 2. It's myself and Elizabeth Uchimura. So, but the reason I'm bringing it up here is because the stipulation of the committee is 1 member has to be a member of the California chapter. So I currently fill that, but eventually when I transfer off, we're going to have someone else. So I thought I would bring it up at the meeting just to see if anyone's, we can certainly have more than 3. But it is a very short time commitment. We just have to decide awards. Right now, we're trying to find out this year if we can use Travel Grant Awards to pay registration for a virtual conference instead of paying travel. And I haven't heard from the board yet what the status of that is, but it's a very low commitment committee, and I would welcome you if you wanted to be on it, but we are in need of at least 1 person. So throwing that out there. Thank you for consideration.
This one, the conference travel grants.
I'm sorry?
This one right here, the conference travel grant.
Yes. Normally, yes, we decide, we have a set amount of funds, and people apply for help towards travel and hotel and that sort of thing, and we decide who gets it and how much. And usually it's almost everyone who applies gets some amount of money. It's just sort of deciding that. But like I said, this next year, it may just be registration fees, and anyone who applies for registration fees will get it. I don't know yet.
Tomorrow, you said you were the chair of the Dina Epstein, right?
Yeah, outgoing chair. And there's gonna be an opening on that one as well. So it's wonderful committee, I think. Just a lot of fun. Feels like you're supporting new research.
Also, just a little bit of history, but if I can. The travel awards require someone from the California chapter because one of the awards, which is probably the first award, was the Kevin Freeman Travel Grant, and that was established by the Northern California chapter in memory of Kevin Freeman. And one of their initial stipulations was that someone from the California, or the Northern California chapter needed to be on that committee every year. So that's just the why.
Thought maybe it was just like a travel distance.
Equity.
Right. Any other questions?
Did you say every committee meets online? Yeah.
I believe that is currently true. I don't know if there's been they discussed it to death at MLA, and I think that the upshot was pretty much that they were going to continue doing committee meetings online, but I don't know if there's been any official decree that they're always going to be online forever. I think that's what's happening right now. Well, thanks for your time.
Thanks for me.